Now, back to Carolyn Craft's Inner Wisdom on Wisdom Radio.
When does self-reinvention become a lifetime task? Marcia Sinetar is with us this hour. She founded her own human resource advisory firm in 1980. She counsels with and works with corporations, education, and she also is her books are used worldwide in a growing number of professional settings in colleges and therapy and spiritual direction programs. We'll give you more about Marcia, how you can log on to find out more about her and her books as we go through this hour. You know, Marcia, in speaking or describing, I guess, what self-reinvention could possibly look like, I'm thinking about, in one case, thinking about Madonna,
Right.
as an actor, how she reinvents herself. But it's not that kind of reinvention I know that you're talking about. And I remember at 35 leaving the commercial broadcast world. 3 years later, I ended up in the metaphysical order of unity,
Right.
becoming an ordained minister at that time. But it took 3 years of painful letting go and also expectation. But I think it was the letting go that made space for the reinvention to take place, and it meant letting go of the way I saw myself.
Well, that is so true, because we have a tendency to see ourselves in a role, like I am a mother or I am a teacher, as opposed to something that's a little bit different, like in your case, going into the ministry that you just talked about. But one thing I want to say about reinvention is not necessarily a drastic change. What we're talking about is our identity, our true inner core, finding its rightful place in the scheme of things. And there's always another way, always a more fulfilling way to do that.
For example, let's take someone like I heard about recently, a very famous broadcaster.
Who started out as a single mother. She was broke. I think she was on welfare, the story goes. And she began to inch into performing. She loved it while working on the side or doing whatever it was she did. And I think I remember hearing that she went into a small local community theater. And little by little she grew. And what came out of her, and this relates to what I'm talking about, this identity. What came out of her was a performing artist who was also a leader. In other words, she's dominating her field because she found her rightful place in it. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that if we can ask ourselves, for example, you look for patterns in your life, and I can give you an example, a little exercise your listeners can ask themselves if you wish. But we look for patterns about our motivation. What has always turned me on? What characterizes my relationships with people? What kind of role do I take? Whereas, what tasks do I like to do? Have I always enjoyed doing? What talents seem to want to come out? This way, we're bringing out more of who we are as opposed to changing or rupturing who we are.
It sounds like the old example of the onion peeling back, that you're actually getting more to the core of who you are.
That is exactly what it's like. And you can do this by, for example, you can take 5 or 6 blocks of time in your life, depending on how old you are. You can go from childhood through young adulthood, through adulthood, through the current if you're older. And you can say, what achievements have really fulfilled me, irrespective of what other people thought of it. What did I find fulfilling? And you write down a few of these, and then you start to look for those patterns I mentioned. What turned me on? What relationship was I a leader? Did I enjoy working in a team? Was I clarifying for people? You see what I mean?
Yes.
And you say to yourself, well, what talents was I using? It's that sort of thing. We're kind of detectives to that unfolding process.
You're listening to Wisdom Radio. I'm Carolyn Craft speaking with Marcia Sinetar. And Marcia is the best-selling author of Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow, and Ordinary People as Monks and Mystics, and several others. You know what? I was just reminded, Marcia, of your book, Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. So many people quote you from that, and it seems to speak to what you are saying right now, finding what's at the heart of who you are.
Well, actually, that exercise is in that book, and many like them. And I got a letter last week, and it was most fulfilling, and I would love to share it with you. It was from a woman who used to be in a commercial field, and she read that and another book called To Build the Life You Want, Create the Work You Love. And anyway, long story short, it took her 10 years, but she's now an educator at university level, and she's helping students do this same peeling back of the onion to find the real self. Now, this is really fulfilling because you don't realize how much good we can each do if we find our right place in the scheme of things. Then our reinvention is like a greater exploration as opposed to simply jumping from one thing to another. It's much more integrated.
I think that some of what creates the violence is that frustrated creativity, and especially if children, teenagers, young adults can get in touch with that. Where there's violence, I think there is, or anger or frustration in its lighter forms, there is creativity or wanting to be and express in the world your full potential, whether you're conscious of it or not.
Right. Well, I have to share a personal story, and I wasn't planning on doing it, but I think I will just from what you've just said. I remember that when I was a teenager, I guess 13, things were not going well at home, and I had that tremendous creative drive, misunderstood in the family setup. I'm not blaming anybody, but what helped me was, and I'm not recommending this, was simply to carve out my own life. In other words, I actively negotiated to leave the family nest. And looking back on it now, I would have to say that's one of the best things I ever did. Because had I stayed, it would have been exactly what you're talking about. Always hitting your head against a wall. And you can love people, and you can feel loved by them and still not feel understood, especially if you're a very creative type of individual, like an artist. If you listen to interviews of people who are in the media, you will often hear that when they were growing up, it was not an easy time. And what we see is that where there has been an abuse of someone, there's also that high frustration that can lead to upsets in the adult life. It's not a smooth transition if we don't feel connected, if we don't feel contributing, and in control of at least, I don't mean controlling of other people, but at least in control of our best interests.
Well, we've learned that a child that is being abused by a parent, if given the choice to live in a family where there isn't abuse, but it's not with their parents, that they will opt for the abusive parent. It's comfortable. It's what they know. Not comfortable in a good sense, but it's what they know. So I guess our work is in maybe part of the reinvention and peeling back the onion is recognizing those things from whether it was society or the environment or our parents or even in our cellular memory that no longer, that maybe never served us, but no longer serves us.
Yes. I think that what has to happen is that the individual has to find somebody, some trustworthy, stable, nurturing other, and this goes all through life, to have a conversation with that is mature enough that can lead them in the directions that you're talking about. Because otherwise we stay, as you say, we stay in those abusive situations. And we see this all the time when there's a news story about someone that's been abused, and we ask, why did they stay? Well, sometimes there's a warped understanding of what love is. They begin to associate love with violence or love with torment. Oh, this is sick. This is not love. So, one thing that helps in this clarification process is to say to ourselves, what do we cherish? What motivates us? This goes back to what I was talking about. And if we can find the healthiest motivators and cultivate that, so we can lower our threshold of frustration by what we say to ourselves. And children are not too young to learn that.
You are listening to Wisdom Radio. I'm Carolyn Craft, talking with Marcia Sinetar about reinvention, something we can do not just once in our lifetime, but have the capacity to do in an ongoing way to really bring about a richer life, a fuller life, and be the real person that we were destined to be. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.